there is a great possibility this bird is still out there. And I actually put this at a 7 out of 10 chance that the bird is still out there living in remote numbers. Extinct animals is something that has fascinated people for decades now. And at times, extinct animals are rediscovered. A bird that was extinct for 140 years, the black-naped pheasant pigeon, was rediscovered just in 2022 in Papua New Guinea. So what other birds could still be out there? Today I want to talk about 5 extinct birds that I believe could still be out there and still be alive. As always, I will be out birding and showcasing some of the birds that we still have around for sure. But let's talk about 5 birds that I believe could still be alive. I'm currently out at my small local airport in Logan, Utah, and I'm looking for a short-eared owl. Short-eared owls like to hang out in these airport type areas. There's large fields available for them, and it's just before the sun has come up. Unfortunately, no sign of it just yet, but we do have some sandhill cranes in the background behind us. Those birds are really awesome. They do look prehistoric. Let's see what other birds we can find, and let's see if we can find the short-eared owl as well and talk about 5 extinct birds that could still be alive. I don't really like car birding, but out here where we're at, there's not really any point in me walking along this dirt road. So we're gonna see if we can find this short-eared owl real quick. I think it's going to be a tall order, unfortunately. So the first bird on our list, sitting at number 5, is the imperial woodpecker. Now this bird species was native to Mexico, parts of Mexico at least, and was the largest woodpecker species in the world. It looks eerily similar to the ivory-billed woodpecker, which we may or may not talk about later in this video, but it is a separate species. It was last seen in Durango in 1956. Now, why did it go extinct? It went extinct due to logging practices. Loggers actually encouraged the locals to smear poison on the trees because they said that the bird was damaging their timber. These claims aren't entirely true. In fact, this woodpecker species really only bored holes in already dead trees, which you don't use for timber. So unfortunately, they were killing these woodpeckers for no reason, which is a thing that humans do quite frequently throughout history, as you'll see in some of these examples. Now, I'm only putting this bird at a 2 out of 10 chance for survival. The reason being is it's absolutely massive, but there are some remote areas that it could still be thriving and alive in. This bird isn't actually officially declared extinct, as is with a lot of these birds on this list, and that can be a good thing, actually. The reason being is if the bird is finally declared extinct, then the problem is that you can lose conservation for those areas and those habitats, and logging practices can become more extreme in those areas. Actually, probably a good thing that a lot of these birds aren't listed as officially extinct, but they are widely declared extinct by most people and organizations. So unfortunately, the imperial woodpecker has a very low chance in my book of survival, but it could still be out there. Bird was photographed right out here in this field. No sign of it. I did get excited about a bird that was sitting on some hay bales back here, but I believe that it is a hawk species instead of a short-eared owl. Short-eared owls are really top-heavy, meaning that they have like a really big bowling ball head, as is with most owl species out there, and this bird just doesn't have a big enough noggin to be an owl. We're gonna continue looking around. I have a few stops in mind today while we talk about some fascinating bird species. No sign of the birds, so we're gonna continue driving down this road. Again, I'm gonna hit a few hot spots today to see what birds we can find. Unfortunately, no sign of the short-eared owl. We're gonna head to another location. I have a few more targets on my list, and we're gonna continue to talk about 4 more extinct species that might still be out there. New location now. I am now at Hiram State Park. I have a few targets here I'm looking for. Great egret would be a first for the county. Caspian tern, I need for the year. So hopefully we can find those. Also, solitary sandpiper was reported here. That would be a lifer for me. Next bird at number 4 on the extinct birds list that might still be alive today is the Bachman's warbler. Now, the last unconfirmed sighting of the bird was in the 1980s, but the last confirmed sighting of this bird was in the 1960s. Now, this was a migratory species, so this means that the bird would go winter in Cuba, and it would actually come up into the US, you know, during the warmer months. Now, unfortunately, this bird had kind of a similar fate as all these other birds. It suffered from habitat loss, which really cut into this bird's habitat, causing it to decline very rapidly. Not a lot is known about the bird, as it was a very skulky species when it was migrating. A reason why I think that this has a very low chance of survival is that in its breeding, or during its breeding season, it would post up on branches and it would actually call very loudly. So should not be a hard bird to find. One year in the mid 1900s, as it was wintering in Cuba, Cuba was struck by a massive winter hurricane, which could have decimated a big chunk of the population and accelerated its extinction. That's why this bird, I give a 1 out of 10 chance of still being out there. Although anything is certainly possible, this is the lowest chance that we have on the list. There's some that have much better chances coming up, so stay tuned to see what those birds are. Just had a bald eagle fly over us. That's pretty cool. It's always fun to see our nation's, you know, national bird flying around out there. Unfortunately, no sign of the Caspian tern, no sign of the solitary sandpiper, and no sign of the great egret. All 3 birds that I needed for today. We're gonna continue looking though. There's a lot of land to check out and cover out here, and it's very possible that it could still be here. Solitary sandpipers are smaller too, so with this vast landscape, they could very well be just in a place that I haven't looked yet. So we're going to continue onward and talk about number 3 on the extinct birds that might still be alive. Next bird on my list is the Eskimo curlew, also known as the northern curlew. At one point, this bird was one of the most numerous shorebirds in North America. People started killing them by the thousands each year, starting in the 1800s. And by the late 1800s, they started killing them at a rate of about 2 million birds per year. It's just something with humans where they just want to go out and just kill everything that they possibly can. I don't understand the mentality, maybe because it was cultural back then, but it's definitely not cultural now. I don't know. It's really odd behavior, but I guess that's how we were back in the day. They were really common in the West Arctic and Alaska and Canada as well. And the bird sightings have gone all the way up until the 1980s actually. So people actually saw these birds in Texas in 1981. They saw 23 of them in Texas in 1981, which is pretty amazing. Now, the reason that this bird gets a 4 out of 10 on the likelihood that it's still alive scale is because of recency. It was only seen 40 years ago compared to some of these birds that haven't been seen nearly in 100 years. So 40 years ago, this bird was seen. The one thing that makes me doubt that it's still out there is that it is a migratory bird. So it should be moving unless it's adapted for some reason, but it should be moving. And at some point, if it's still around, we should find one. Eskimo curlew, very unfortunate story. One of the most numerous birds in America, eerily similar to the passenger pigeon being decimated by human hunting and shooting them out of the sky. Eskimo curlew sits at number 3 on my list. Just had a Cooper's or a sharp-shinned hawk up above me here. Fortunately, it's a little bit silhouetted, so I'll have to try to brighten the footage for you guys. Let me know in the comments below, which one do you think it is? One of the tougher IDs in birding is that bird. And in the right circumstances, I can definitely identify which one is which, but with this lighting and me out in the field right now, I'll have to come back to it later. There's a western grebe out there on the water that I was just filming, surrounded by a whole bunch of swallows. Too far for me to tell what they are. My guess would be bank or northern rough-winged swallows. Probably bank, I don't know. It's hard to tell from this distance. Just saw some coots swimming through the grasses out here. That's pretty incredible. I mean, this is like the perfect spot for grebes and coots. There's a lot of cover, a lot covering them, a lot of places to hide, so that's pretty amazing. Okay, so I don't get to see these very often, but we got the fastest through the air bird on the entire planet up on this cliffside right up here. Peregrine falcon. Wow, I've only seen that bird once in Cache County before, and I obviously didn't film it. And it's been since last December was the last time I saw a peregrine falcon. So peregrine falcon down on the list, just chilling up here on the hillside. Absolutely incredible. Super happy with that bird. I actually just saw two great blue herons going at it. One was flying in. I thought it was the only one, and then a second one flew in, started going at it. You don't get to hear great blue herons make noise very often, but that was pretty cool to see them going at it and hearing them screech and call out. Let's talk about number 2 on my list real quick. Number 2 on my list is the pink-headed duck. Now this duck is native to Myanmar, India, Bangladesh, and it hasn't been seen in quite a while. It's always been considered kind of a rare and elusive bird. And whenever that's the case, honestly, that means one of two things for me. Number 1, it was on its way out the door a long time ago, so it's probably long gone by now. Or number 2, it's elusive and it has learned to stay away from humans. Therefore, that it could very well be still out there and alive and thriving in very remote areas. Now, this bird is actually believed to probably still be out there in small numbers, especially in Myanmar, in the swampy marshes of Myanmar. Very remote areas, very hard to access. And in 1988, an American birder named Rory Nugent and a birder from Delhi named Shekhar Barua actually claimed to have seen the bird on the banks of the Brahmaputra River in India. And of course, there are a lot of people who don't think that that's the case, that they probably didn't see the bird. Maybe they got it mixed up with a few of the other species in the area that look kind of similar. But this is a very unique looking duck. And I feel like, yeah, sometimes your eyes see what you want to see, as we'll talk about coming up here with my number 1 bird on my list. There is a great possibility this bird is still out there. And I actually put this at a 7 out of 10 chance that the bird is still out there living in remote numbers. Now, it's obviously just difficult to maybe do an expedition out there to see if the bird is still there, but it's pretty amazing if that bird is still thriving somewhere in the remote regions of Myanmar. So I just came upon this pond. Well, I think it's actually the river that comes into the reservoir out here. I didn't actually know it was here. But we have a double-crested cormorant. Talk about birds that act like dinosaurs. I guess a lot of birds act like dinosaurs, but this one is very dinosaur-like. Double-crested cormorant, and then out popped out of the water, pied-billed grebe as well. So 2 more species on the day. I'm gonna be very quiet walking up into this area because I don't want to spook anything, especially like a great egret that might be lurking around the corner here. Remember how I said I didn't want to spook anything? Unfortunately, I walked right up on 3 solitary sandpipers, so those took off. That's a lifer for me. Pretty amazing, super happy to get that. Really wish I would have gotten it on camera for you guys, but that's just the goal that I guess we'll have to have moving into the future. Just filmed a Forster's tern diving into the water, so that's pretty incredible. What cool birds terns are. They'll fly over the water and then they'll kind of turn in, dive in, catch small fish, crustaceans, stuff like that. So also pretty amazing birds. You're gonna hear amazing birds come out of my mouth about 30 times a day, and I don't regret it one bit. I just picked up my lifer solitary sandpiper. I mentioned that I flushed them earlier, and I decided to check one more spot, and it was sitting right in front of me. I can't believe it. That is such, 2 videos in a row with a lifer. I'm feeling good. Picked up the solitary sandpiper. It looks very similar to the spotted sandpiper, and sometimes it'll even bob its tail up and down like a spotted sandpiper, but it has a very prominent white eye ring on it. So pretty amazing to pick up the solitary sandpiper finally. I was beginning to fear after this trip I would have considered that a nemesis bird because I've gone looking for it about 4 times now. Picked it up, boom, right in front of me. Awesome bird to pick up before we head back. I thought this person was creepily watching me basically my entire walk, but check this out real quick. It's a mannequin. It's not a real person. What the heck? Before we talk about the number one bird on my list, I'm gonna give you a chance to throw your guesses down in the comments below. What do you think the number one bird is on this list? If it's not obvious, it'll be obvious to you when I say it in about 3, 2, 1. Number one bird on my list for possibly still being alive is the ivory-billed woodpecker. This bird is native to the United States. I'll put its historical range, or at least what we think its range was, because we're not exactly sure, up on the screen. But this bird lived in the southeastern part of the United States. Very large woodpecker. It's famous for having this big white honkin' bill. Obviously, that's what gave it its name, the ivory-billed woodpecker. Now, this is another example of a bird that was rare before we really got a foothold in the US. Now, again, that could mean two things. It was already on its way out the door, or number two, it has learned and adapted to avoid humans, which could be a reason why we haven't been able to find it in almost 80 years. Now, here's a couple cool stories. Teddy Roosevelt actually wrote about running into a large white-beaked woodpecker in 1907 while he was on a bear hunt. At that time, the bird was already rare. Now, we know now that it lived all the way up into the last confirmed sighting was 1944. But in 1907, it was already a scarce bird to find. Thomas Jefferson, for example, listed a white-beaked woodpecker on his Birds of Virginia list. There's another woodpecker out there called the pileated woodpecker. It looks very similar to the ivory-billed woodpecker, and a lot of sightings today, you know, people that send in photos and say, I've seen an ivory-billed, I've seen an ivory-billed, all of them have been confirmed to be, for the most part, pileated woodpeckers, if they are good enough photos to identify anything at all. A big way to identify an ivory-billed woodpecker over a pileated woodpecker is an ivory-billed woodpecker has a big white triangle backpack on its back that the pileated woodpecker lacks. And then there's a few other technical things like the way it latches onto trees, its posture on how it stands, stuff like that, different vocalizations, but we won't get into that here. Now, there's a few things that increase this bird's chances of still being around, in my opinion. The first one is that it's a non-migratory bird. So there's not a lot of movement going on for this bird. It could be in very remote areas of Louisiana, for example. There are some very unexplored areas of our country, hard to access areas as well. It lived in very swampy habitats. So that could be a reason why we haven't found it. But why did it go extinct in the first place? Now, again, human activity, logging, hunting, but honestly, mostly logging, caused this bird's habitat to decrease very rapidly, which also led it to decrease in its population as well. Just ran into some mule deer up here, so that's pretty cool. Cute little mule deer. I've seen tracks all day long, so I was wondering when I'd run into those. Now, by the 1920s, the bird was already believed to have gone extinct, but a lot of people could not let it go, kind of like how a lot of people cannot let it go today. I personally think that it's a good thing that we want things to still be out there. If the ivory-billed woodpecker is considered extinct, officially, because it's not, that's another thing that a lot of people don't realize, it's not officially declared extinct yet, but that could have conservation implications and could decimate the remaining population, if any, because you're reducing those protections for that area that it could be. Now, in the 1930s, an expedition was started and led out by a few people, but one of those people was James Tanner. He was a PhD student, and I'm going to mention him because I'm a PhD student, and I think that's cool. He led an expedition out to Louisiana, and they found a population of ivory-billed woodpeckers, and they studied them for a period of time. I can't remember how long they studied them, but they studied them for a period of time, and what ended up happening is they were able to get video footage, the only footage of an ivory-billed woodpecker, several ivory-billed woodpeckers. And not only that, they were also able to get the only audio of ivory-billed woodpeckers. So if it wasn't for that expedition, we would be starting from ground zero on trying to re-find this bird. Now, recently, in the last couple years or so, there was an expedition led out again by scholars looking for the ivory-billed woodpecker. They set up trail cams, they set up sound listening devices, they sent out drones. They came back with evidence that suggested that the ivory-billed woodpecker is still out there. Now, I've looked over that evidence. I'm sure a lot of you have looked over that evidence as well. And it's, in my opinion, not conclusive that the ivory-billed woodpecker is still out there, even though they make it seem like they've found it. They've done it. I'm not slamming them at all for their effort. I think it's very admirable. I think it's very important that they do these studies. But unfortunately, the evidence that is presented does not seem conclusive to me, and I think a lot of the scientific community agrees with that. However, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service was going to declare the ivory-billed woodpecker officially extinct, and when this paper came out, they delayed that decision, deciding that it was not time for them to declare the ivory-billed woodpecker officially lost. And that is still delayed as well. What do I rank this out of 10 on the likelihood that it's still alive? I rank this honestly at a 4 out of 10. Now, it's higher than the Bachman's warbler. It's the same as the Eskimo curlew. Why? It's not a migratory species. There's not a lot of movement going on with the ivory-billed woodpecker. A lot of people claiming to see them out of its range. You're seeing pileated woodpeckers. 99.9% of the time you're seeing pileated woodpeckers. Make sure you double check those IDs. Let me know in the comments below, what extinct bird do you believe is still out there? Please subscribe if you like anything birds. We go on birding adventures twice a week, and we do these cool list things as well. If you'd like additional ways to support the channel, links to my merch and my membership program are in the description below. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey. I hope to see you all next time on Bright Eyed Birding.